Hello YouTube, and welcome back to another Canon FD lens conversion. Today we'll be converting the Canon FD 14mm f2.8L lens from FD mount, this guy, to EF mount, this guy. Have a couple things in front of me which I'll go over real quick. Firstly, this beautiful piece of glass. This is the Canon 14mm f2.8L FD lens. It's basically the widest rectilinear vintage still lens for full frame that you can get, and it's definitely the widest of the FD set. I just wanted to show it off right at the beginning. I'm actually very paranoid about this front element because it sticks out so far. So I'm going to put the cap back on. This has a its own proprietary cap because it is so wide. You can't actually put a regular lens cap on it, which will prevent us from doing the full cine-vised version where we add a front ring. But I do have some gear over here that we'll be adding on later, and then I also have a couple of things like this iris crease that we'll be getting to later on in the video. I have these three pieces which are from Ed Mika. This is the mount, the back part, and this is the iris ring, the Ed bushing they call it, which we'll be actually using to convert this lens over. Then I have some tools over here. I've got just a regular little tiny flathead screwdriver that I use. And then I have this, which is a JIS Type 00 Japanese Industrial Standard screwdriver, which is great for working on these Japanese manufactured lenses because it's a little bit different than Phillips. Make sure that you don't end up stripping the screws when you try and take it off. And here's the back cap for it. But we will keep the back cap off for now, put it right next to it because we'll actually use that to take off some screws, which is how we're going to start out this thing. For just a couple shout outs before we get started. So yeah, the way I'm going to convert this is to Ed Mika mount. This is the best way and really the only way to convert these lenses from FD to EF. If you want to actually have an EF back, work with your EF cameras with these FD lenses. These mounts are really nicely machined by Ed Mika. You can find out more in the information below. And then you can get them serviced if you don't want to do this yourself. You're not as much of a gear nerd as I am. You can actually have these lenses converted to EF using these mounts by sending them into cine-mod.com. He'll do it all for you. He'll do everything basically we'll be doing in this video. But if you're like me and you like taking things apart, putting them back together, then this is a video for you. So we'll get started. I'll put this mount to the side for now, and we'll start off by loosening the three screws which are on the outside of this lens, this black ring right here with the red dot on it. They're really small and they come out pretty easily, but you want to apply pressure every time you're loosening these screws. I've already taken this lens apart once before. Wow, that landed right in my little tray. So they're coming out pretty easily, but if this is the first time that it's literally ever been the screws have ever moved in 30 years since that they were manufactured, then you want to make sure you're applying a good amount of pressure as you loosen them. And if you get stuck, actually a trick is try tightening them, then loosening them, just to wiggle your way out of that. Loosen up the glue that's been in there for so long and the rust. So okay, great. So we've taken out the three screws. I'll just keep them in this little tray right here for now. And then we can go down to our second level, which is by taking off this ring, this silver ring right here. Just pops on out. I usually like to sneak a screwdriver just right underneath it. That comes off. So this is the kind of the thing that holds it all together. We don't need it anymore, so we're gonna get rid of it. Doop. Then we're down to our second level, and this whole mount now comes off, which is a real shame because I really like this whole back filter tray that the FD lens comes with. It's really amazing since there's no way to thread any filters on the front. There's this little drop-in tray that's kind of awesome, but unfortunately we will be replacing it with this, so we'll be losing this tray. So all you have to do is grab it right in the middle and just pull up. You might hear it kind of loosen up on you. That's okay, that's normal. Yep, there it goes. And it's going to spin on me too because there's a spring controlling the iris right now. So So it wants to rotate on me, that's fine, you can let it rotate. Just pull it straight up, set that aside. And now we're down to our third level, which has another set of screws. So there's 4 screws here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This fourth one is a silver screw, and the other 3 are black. And you just want to remember the orientation of those. So the silver screw is the clockwise one in this set of 2. So we'll make sure that we put these back the same way. So these will actually go back. The other screws you can set aside, forever basically, until you want to reconvert the thing. Which is another thing to bring up. So all these lenses are reversible, so if you wanted to convert this lens, use it on your EF cameras, and then go back, use it on your film camera, or sell it to a photographer that wants to use it in FD mount, then you can do that. It's pretty easy. So great. I'm going to take this off after the 4 screws are loosened. I'm going to grab the screws right now just to get them out of here. One screw's being a little stubborn. Great, so these 3 pieces are done, along with this 4th piece, which is this little silver ring right in here that helps control the aperture. But we don't need that anymore because we'll be doing fully manual aperture with our own conversion mount. So the way you do that is there's this little notch right here, this little black notch, and that wants to line up with this little notch right here in the silver ring. They kind of fit nicely together, and then they pull straight up. Boop. So now all these 4 pieces are done. We don't need them anymore. Put them in a Ziploc bag, keep them away in the back of your closet if you ever need them again. Definitely a valuable thing to hold on to, but if you're just using this for EF mount, then you don't need them. Great, so now we're down to the iris part. You can hear that this has hard stops. It says it's what's called a clicked lens, and we want to declick it because I'll be using this for video, and I want to have a smooth aperture. I want to be able to dial in my aperture, and I also want to be able to do things like iris racks in the middle of takes. So to make that possible, we are going to declick the lens. Now this just pops right out. You have to align the outer notches so that way they're clear, and that's going to pop out that little silver tab, and then you just pull straight up. Flip it upside down. There it is. And oh, lost it. Normally there's a little ball bearing right there. There's not this time because the ball bearing is stuck actually on the little blue ring right there. The little blue tab that actually makes the clicks. You see there's like little divots in there. The clicks are caused by this ball bearing, which I'll drop right there, rolling over each one of these stops and getting kind of stuck in each one. So now that I took that ball bearing out, which I'm going to save, again, I'm saving the ball bearing, now we are completely declicked. So if you wanted to, mount this right on your camera right away, that's all it takes. You just remove some pieces, then we're going to mount the iris ring, the Ed bushing to control the iris, put this back on, and then we'll put the mount back on, and you're done. But you came for the extended version, which involves a couple more things, including dampening the iris to make sure it's completely smooth and has enough resistance so it doesn't have bumps and doesn't just float and doesn't creep. Dampening the iris involves putting grease around various particular parts of the lens. So right now I have from cine-mod lens his super secret grease, which I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, kind of like a Vaseline kind of solution, but you want to make sure that if you're going to do this, you buy the right material, because this grease is designed to work inside of lenses, and it's designed so that way it doesn't get stuck places that it's not supposed to. It doesn't get really hot in the summer and melt and then get into other places. It doesn't bind up in the winter and get cold. It doesn't crumble, so you want to make sure you have the right stuff. So this is available at cine-moddlens.com, and the way we're going to apply it is just this tiny little screwdriver. There's a couple ways you could do it with a brush or whatever, but basically you just want to make sure you have a very, like something you can apply this with pretty easily, and you just want a tiny coat. So I'm going to coat a couple different surfaces. The first being this bottom side right here that the iris ring was on. Right. The second is kind of the opposite end of that, the sort of other side of the sandwich, which is this side of the iris ring. And then, you know, I'll like touch up the walls around it a little bit, but that's kind of overkill. And then the third thing is this, which is the Ed bushing, which we'll get to later. But this controls the aperture, but it ends up rubbing against these little pieces right here, these little tabs. So we'll want to grease that as well, so that way that way it's nice and smooth. Anyway, great. So I'm just gonna get started. I'm basically just gonna do a small, thin layer, just enough to kind of get a little bit on all around this ring. Okay, so I have a thin layer now all around this outer ring on the bottom part. Now I'm going to do the opposite side, which is this aperture ring here. I'm just going to do this side of the ring, mainly these three little leaves coming out here. And I'm going to leave this tab in too. You want to keep the tab in because that locks your aperture from going into the auto setting, which actually will end up opening it back up. So if you go to f22 and then you didn't have that tab in, you could go past f22 and actually the iris would then open back up to like an f16, an f8 or 11. So I prefer to have it just be a hard stop at my highest aperture, so I'm going to keep that in. Unfortunately, that means you add a little bit of resistance with this tab that pushes up against it, but something I'm definitely able to live with, and it's still going to be very smooth after we do this. And I'm taking extra care now. Like I said, I'm doing a very thin coat, but I'm taking extra care to do this metal piece because I feel like that's going to have a lot of resistance on it. And then also just the tip here that's going to be rubbing against the inner barrel. That I just want to make sure I really get. Otherwise, doing both sides like I'm doing here is kind of redundant. Might actually be too much grease as well. But yeah, make sure, I think, if you leave that metal piece in, that you get that spot. Okay, great, so that's that. I'm going to go ahead and put it on now. So it is declicked, it is greased, it is, you know, quote unquote dampened, and now we're going to throw it on. So these little tabs line up again. There we go. Just go straight down. You're going to want to push in the auto aperture just to loosen that little catch right there, and push down. Click. There we go. And then just to keep it in place, I'm going to rotate it over so that kind of catches. So now it is, oh yeah, that's nice and smooth. It is dampened. There is some additional buildup I see that we can probably get rid of. Some grease. So I'm going to kind of get in there and kind of just get rid of the excess. Otherwise, I think we did a pretty good job. Great, so now I'm going to put on the Ed bushing, but before I do, I'm going to grease it up as well. I'm just going to grease the whole outside of this ring. And did I say whole outside of the ring? I meant do all the pieces except for this little notch right there, because that actually is going to click in a moment to our iris ring. I mean, it's fine if you did grease it, but ideally that just sits right in, and we don't want that to move at all because that's how it controls the aperture. Okay, so this is now wrapped. Our grease is all done, so I'm going to put that away. Saving our screws and all of the rest of our Ed Mika gear. So now that this is done, it's kind of hard to hold, but you want to, basically I'll show you how this works. So there is two parts of this ring. There is a little tooth right here, I'm calling it the tooth, and then there's a little divot in the ring. So the tooth actually goes in between what's called the goalpost, which is right here. You guys can get a good view of it. And that's the actual mechanism that controls your iris. So this goalpost moves, it opens up a spring, which opens up the aperture. And then the second thing is that notch. Remember that notch from the beginning that had the silver ring that was allowed it to be removed? So this notch right there, that same notch that's on the aperture ring, that is what actually holds the Ed bushing in place and allows it to be controlled manually. So they're about on opposite ends, so I'm basically going to kind of line them up to make my life easier. And then you want to put the tooth in between the goalpost and the notch, or the divot right at that notch. I'm going to kind of grab it just because there's no great way to do it. Putting the notch in first, then the goalpost, but you kind of want to do it at the same time. Great, so they're both have caught. Just gonna wipe off my hands, make sure I get all the grease off, and then boom, they lock into place as you push it down. So now the focus is locked, the grease is applied, and we have full manual aperture control on this lens now. And it's nice and smooth. Okay, so that is full manual aperture control. And now the last thing we need to do is just put it all back together. So I'll take out my screws again. Remember, I have that one silver screw, and I have the smaller silver screw, and I have the 3 larger black screws. Otherwise, this cap and all the other screws can be wrapped, and we will now get this started. So this has 4 holes just like the other mount. We'll want to line those up with the 4 screw holes from before. Remember, you want to start with that silver screw in the clockwise position in that set of 2 screw holes. There you go. Okay, 4 screws in. Now we can mount this on a camera if we wanted to. So the last little piece that Ed Mika includes is this little, I don't know what it's called, but it's, little ring that, helps prevent stuff from getting in there, because there is such a large opening between the mount and the glass that this just sort of helps. Probably helps with light leaks as well, but it's just a little donut that clips into the Ed mount. You'll hear it snap momentarily. There you go, snapped. And look at that, we have full focus control, full aperture control, manual, declicked. And the last finishing touches, we have bring back our 2 items from before. We've got a back cap, go on this back side here. And then we've got this little section, these gears from follow focus gears. Now this 14L is a unique one because it actually has 2 sections. It has this little adapter ring, because the gears won't actually fit over that back or front side, definitely not the front side. So you put on this adapter ring that just kind of grips it tightly, and then this is specifically cut for the 14 to really fit snugly on there. You just kind of slide it down, boom, and I just want to make sure it's kind of right in the middle. Great. So now we have follow focus gears applied, and we can throw this thing right on a camera. I'm going to demonstrate that by cutting my B cam and throwing it on a camera. Okay, here we have my DSLR, EF mount. I'm going to throw this 14 right on there. Now this is a crop sensor, but to really unlock the potential of this lens, you can use it 14mm on a full frame. It's just so wide. You want to line up this little divot right there, and you want to line that up with a little dot. Clicks in, and boom, we can use this now on our Canon EF mount cameras. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of that. Yeah, and good luck with your conversions. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. This is definitely a learning process for me. I had a lot of fun converting these lenses, so I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions you have. Thanks so much.